My name is Rob Weiss. I'm a psychotherapist, a sexologist, an author, recovering sex addict, and I'm kind of your host around here on the site. My feeling and thought is that if you're looking at this video, you're probably looking for more answers than you have, and you're probably trying to figure out how to best take your next steps into healing. And so that's what this video is for. It's an opportunity to answer some very basic questions and really push you toward whatever your next steps might be. And, you know, it may well be that we provide you some really good answers here. So I'm hoping we can help you out. I invited my team member from sexandrelationshiphealing.com, Tammy Verhelst. Tammy takes a lot of calls when people or emails when people initially reach out. So she really talks to a lot of you folks when you're first beginning to struggle, and we've gathered some questions that we want to answer for you. Welcome, Tammy. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. And I want to welcome you to the video as well. I think you will find some information that will be very helpful as you begin this journey. So one of the first questions, and I think this is very important, what is sex addiction?
Okay, well, let me do a little quick promo for something that some of my work. I wrote a book called Sex Addiction 101. And for $10 or whatever it is, if you can pretty much find a very clear, very simply written, very direct explanation of what sex addiction is and how to heal from it. So I can't help but promote Sex Addiction 101 because it's a simple, inexpensive way to learn. There are also videos online. I have some, many other people have them, where you can look up on YouTube, look up sex addiction, and you can find various people explaining and talking about it on the internet. There are a couple of TED Talks on it. So there are a variety of places online to find out about sex addiction. From my perspective, sex addiction is really not even about sex. It's more about someone who has, who consistently and persistently uses the search for sex and the hunt for sex and the desire to have sex as a way to kind of disappear into fantasy. And that can happen with porn, that can happen with hunting for someone out there, an affair partner or a sex worker. But basically for the sex addict, it means that we don't have control over how we choose to spend our time. We don't really have a sense of being able to control the desire to go find this person or situation. And we often find ourselves acting in ways in the pursuit of sex or the pursuit of relationships that really aren't good for us. We get arrested, we lose relationships, people find porn on our computers at work, we can't finish school, we have all kinds of consequences that over time clearly become related to our sexual behavior or the way we're hiding our sexual behavior, and yet we seem unable to or unwilling to make changes in our sexual lives that would make the rest of our life go better. So in my mind, if you're someone who you really have promised yourself many times, I'm not going to do this again sexually, I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to see this person, and you don't have control over it, meaning you make promises and you break them to yourself or others. If you find yourself really feeling obsessed or preoccupied with the pursuit of sex, the hunt for sex, the search for sex, and even maybe the sexual situations you end up in aren't maybe something you feel good about, but you lose yourself in the looking and the hunting and the searching. And if you've had consequences related to your sexual behavior, you have lost a relationship, you've hurt someone important to you, you don't have access to your kids, you lost your opportunity to go to school in that place. When you've had consequences, again, that's when we start talking about maybe there's an addiction present, especially if you're not responding to those consequences by making changes. I think that would kind of sum it up.
Great. So how would someone know if they are a sex addict?
Well, you know, it's funny. It's a difficult question to answer in some ways, but not so difficult. If there are sexual behaviors that are problematic for you, and I'm going to define a few things around that in a second, try eliminating them. One of the great things I love about Alcoholics Anonymous is they kind of make it easy to figure out if you're an alcoholic. You know, in AA, they say, just take 30 days and stop drinking. And if that's not a problem for you and you don't have a desire to drink and you're not, you know, trying to bang at the bar at 3 in the morning to get in there to serve you alcohol, you're probably, whether you have issues with alcohol or not, you're not an alcoholic. And so I would say the same thing, you know, put a whole bunch of behaviors, whatever these sexual problem behaviors are, on a list and say, I'm going to cut them out of my life for 30 days, a good long period of time. And if you find yourself unable to do that, then I would start thinking about what is the reason that I can't simply say, I don't want to do that, and then stick to it. Because you know as well as I do, you may desire a candy bar, you may desire a new car, you may desire that, tickets to the ball game this weekend, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can or will do those things. But when it comes to sex, we will find a way to go do that thing, even though we know it isn't good for us. We know it's going to cause us problems, and we're going to do it anyway.
I want to share another resource. There's a self-test on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. If you go to the place under addicts, there is a test. So you can get a quick screen of, you might possibly have a problem. You may not. It's a great place to find a resource to at least initially assess.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tammy. We did put a self-test or a self-screening here on Sex and Relationship Healing, which you can click up there, like say up there on the bar above my head, and you can download it, you can take it, and I think it's pretty clear if you answer the questions honestly to yourself, you're going to see a picture that is either going to tell you that there are things you need to look at or not. Yeah.
So what does sexual sobriety mean, and will I ever be able to have sex again?
Okay, so these are great questions, because if I was a sex addict and I had friends who were alcoholics, well, I know that their sobriety is they just never drink again. So I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. If I'm going to be a recovering sex addict, does that mean I never get to have sex again? It doesn't work that way. So let me give you a little bit about what it's like. When we as therapists look at naturally occurring functions like eating or sex that have run off the rails into addiction, we understand that unlike alcohol and drugs, or let's say gambling, that person is not going to eliminate these things from their life. No healthy person with an eating problem stopped eating and said, well, now I'm healthy because I don't eat anymore. And it's the same with sex. We don't say, that your sobriety or your healing is eliminating sex. In fact, I think that is counterproductive to healing, to try to eliminate sexuality from your life altogether. To me, that's just jumping from one problem to the other. Sex addiction is actually the leading symptom for what for many of us is an underlying intimacy problem. And so if you think about it, if you avoid sex, then you're not really able to grow at least romantic intimacy. And that's a part of what we need to work on most of all, is how to be more intimate and real with the people we love. So sexual sobriety is really about eliminating the behaviors in your life that are leading you away from your life goals, sexual behaviors. Whether your goal is to stay in a marriage, your goal is to get through school, your goal is to start dating because you've never dated before, your goal is to eliminate the porn so you can be hanging out with more friends, whatever it is your goal is, that's where we're going to join you around what sobriety is. So when I think about sobriety, let's say for a 54-year-old married guy who has 3 kids, his sobriety is probably going to have a lot to do with his relationship with his spouse and maybe masturbation, but he's probably not going to be looking at a lot of porn, not having sex outside of his relationship, he's pretty much going to be stabilizing his sexuality around the situation he's in. But if I'm working with a 22-year-old guy who's gay and never been on a date, he's going to have a very different plan for what healthy sexuality is. I know that there are some 12-step programs that advise that sex addicts not have sex until they're in a committed marital type relationship. And I actually don't agree with that because I think that a lot of what we need to learn has to do with growing how to feel comfortable holding someone's hand, kissing them on the cheek, enjoying their company without having sex with them. Or for those of us who are just beginning to date and younger, you need to learn how to date and get to sexuality if that's within your value system. Before maybe you decide to get married. There might be a few lessons to learn in there. So if you consider that sex addicts, as I do, really have an underlying intimacy disorder, then taking away sex is not going to help. But focusing on sexuality that is life-affirming, that mirrors our values, our beliefs, and who we are in life, that's a great thing. Sex that is about secrecy, that is about lying, that is about manipulation, that is put in a box over here and I'm just not going to tell anybody about it, that's sex addiction. Those are the problems that the people I work with have, is kind of living a double or compartmentalized life with sex over in one place and the rest of my life over another. And ultimately what healing from sex addiction is, it's about putting your life together. It's about integrity. That's why sexual integrity is an important term to me, because I want to love the person that I'm being sexual with and be sexual with the person that I love and have, or if I'm dating someone and I'm seeing other people, then I want them to know that I'm seeing other people. I don't want to pretend that it's not. So recovery in the biggest sense is about telling your truth, being honest, being real, not having secrets. And so as you look at your sexuality and your relationship and your situation, whatever it is, if you're married or single, or look at what sexual behavior leaves you keeping secrets. What sexual behavior or romantic behavior makes you feel bad about yourself? What sexual or romantic behavior do you feel is undermining your relationship, your work, your family? Those are the things that we might seek to eliminate. But Tammy, I want to say something about orientation and gender identity and fetishes, because there are things that you may not like about your sexuality, what we call your sexual template or your arousal template, the things that turn you on. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that's not something that we can help with. So let me explain. If you're a married guy and you just love your wife and you love your kids and you love living as a heterosexual man, but you're primarily attracted to men and you find yourself looking at a lot of male porn and wanting to, or actually having sex with men outside your relationship, I probably can't help you using an addiction model with that. Or if I do, it's not necessarily going to be to eliminate in any way your attraction or involvement with men. It's going to be to put your life in some kind of integrity. So either you stop sleeping around with men and be satisfied with what you have with your spouse, or you may decide that you can't live with your spouse, you need to move on. But in any case, I am not saying to you that sex addiction treatment is going to eliminate your homosexuality or eliminate your desire for men. That's not something we do. So we don't treat orientation. Some people come to us and they say, well, I'm really into leather. I'm really into shoes. I'm really into putting on women's panties. In other words, you have a part of your sexuality that is you're most aroused and most excited when there's an object, a physical object involved in your sex, meaning leather or lace or panties or feet, or that's called a fetish. And those are also, when people have fetishes, or some people call it kink, when you're into BDSM, you're into leather, you're into those kinds of things, that's probably not going to change either. The volume may get turned up and down, but if that's something that you hate about yourself or you feel is ruining your life, we wouldn't necessarily define a fetish as sex addiction. And finally, some of you may feel that you were born in the wrong body. I work with people who are women that feel they should be men, and men who feel that they should have been women, and people who have all kinds of issues around their gender and their gender identity. And I've certainly worked with men who have said, I just want to feel comfortable as a man in my man's body, and anything else is sex addiction. And I want to say that that's not sex addiction. So if you're struggling with gender issues, if you're struggling with orientation issues, basically if you're struggling with who turns you on or what turns you on, we're really not in the business of eliminating sexual behavior of that kind. What we're in the business is of helping you within your orientation, within your arousal template, engage in sexual behavior that doesn't destroy your relationships, doesn't destroy your goals, your beliefs, or your self-esteem, and that is in line with who you are. However, we're not in the business of eliminating homosexuality or changing gender identity patterns or eliminating fetish and kink, because it's not our belief that we can do that. Those issues are issues that require a sexologist and a lot of work around acceptance.
Okay, thank you. So somebody decides after taking the assessment that they really do need some help, that they have identified that there is a sex addiction issue. So how would they get started in the process of recovery?
Well, I think just by watching this video, you're getting started in the process of recovery. Anything that you do to raise your awareness about the issue is going to help you grow. So if you're reading books, if you're reading Sex Addiction 101, if you're reading Always Turned On, if you're working in one of the workbooks, if you're going to 12-step meetings or support groups, that's a great way to have a free place to go at absolutely no cost to get support. We do have, and we are creating educational experiences here on the site. One of my goals was to take a lot of what I have learned in providing treatment to people who go to treatment centers and bringing it online. So you will see, as we go along, there will be lectures here. There will be interactive lectures. You'll get to talk to me and interact with me if you like, or any of the many therapists or professionals I'm going to bring online. We'll have an educational series. We'll have homework. We're going to have groups for various folks as we go along: gay men, straight men, married men, pastors. We'll have all kinds of folks who will be wanting to meet with their own peer group who are studying with these, struggling with these issues. So I say, hang in there with us. Work with us. We can direct you toward a therapist. We can direct you toward a treatment center. We can direct you to find help at no cost. And all of that really depends, I have to say, on the level of your challenge. So I really do know some people who they'll pick up on a few ideas. They'll read a book. They'll go to some support groups, and they're on the road. They're doing great. And I sincerely hope that is you. I would rather that you got a little bit out of the few things that we offer here for free and could go off and grow and live your life without having to do any more work. Because you're talking, I'm someone who's been working on myself for 30 years. So believe me, I wish I could have saved some of that money from therapy for other things. But the reality is that some people will need more. And you know what? It's okay. My goal is to live a happy life, to live a joyous life, to have friends and family and fun, and to not be driven around by my nose by a sexual, not pulled around by the nose by some sexual desire. I want to choose comfortably and within my value system and within the world that I have created for myself when and how I'm going to be sexual. And I think a lot of us in the beginning, we just don't have control over that. We are going to serve here on this site as a guide toward anyone who wants sexual recovery and is willing to work for it.
Thank you for that. I want to add that along with Sex Addiction 101, you have a companion workbook, and many people have found that very useful as a practical guide to implementing a recovery program. The other thing, you have been doing a series of podcasts, so there will be material in various formats. So the question and answer series that will be on this website, but there's also experts that have been brought in for podcasts as well. So that's another great resource for people.
Yeah, and let me say something more about that. Thank you, Tammy. So one of the reasons that we wanted to create this site was that we know people who do extraordinary therapy and education in sexuality, in sexual health, in addiction, in relationships, in intimacy building, and I want to bring them to you. And fortunately, some of those folks are my friends. So we will be having lectures and activities and information coming to you, things you can sign up for, things you can participate in, and access to people and situations and learning that you might not get otherwise. And this isn't a site for everybody. If your problem is alcoholism, you're probably in the wrong site. If your problem is compulsive shopping, you're probably on the wrong site. But if you've got issues with sex, I think we can help. What else you got, Tammy? What questions are people asking?
I think one of the things that was very telling and a lot of people find useful is to understand that sex addiction isn't just about sex. So, or sex addiction isn't really about sex. So perhaps sharing a little bit about that.
I think both sex and porn addiction serve a function. And if you can take yourself out of the excitement of the sex or the anger that their partner is doing this or whatever emotional state you're in around the issue, and if you're the sex addict and you look at your patterns, what you'll begin to see is that the sex or the pursuit of sex probably serves some emotional function for you. I know for me, it served the function of helping me tolerate some of my deepest fears like abandonment or that I was unlovable or that I wouldn't be able to develop friendships. I had some pretty deep losses growing up at a very early age, and I learned a bunch of lessons that were not really conducive to self-esteem and succeeding as an adult. And a lot of those broken messages and unhappiness translated in my becoming a sex addict, because that was how I learned to meet my emotional needs with people without having to take a risk that they could hurt me. And it's a funny and sad thing that many of us are in relationships or marriages or commitments where there is somebody right there who could meet our emotional and our intimacy needs. The truth is that we either often don't feel we deserve it, or we give ourselves all kinds of reasons why it's what they're giving us isn't good enough, or we just say, we need more. And what I want to say to every sex addict is that what we're acting out over is our desire for connection. It's our desire to feel comforted and loved and connected, even though it may just seem like I'm going to a massage parlor, which is kind of the opposite of connection and relationship, but it's a safer route to sex, to relate. You know, when I had sex with a stranger, excuse me, I never felt like they were going to let me down. I never felt like they were going to hurt me. I never felt like they were going to leave me with feelings that I couldn't handle. And most sex addicts will say they walk into situations like strip clubs or affair partners or stuff online or porn, and they feel powerful. They feel in control. They feel like they have it all together with all of that adrenaline and excitement about what they're doing. And as Tammy was saying, you know, I don't believe that sex addiction is really about sex. I think it's about using a lot of fantasy and a lot of intensity to bring yourself into a different state of consciousness. You know, I know if I sat here and I thought for a long time about people I loved and the situations that are important to me that have great meaning, my heart would be touched. And that would mean I'd begin to shift my neurochemistry by thinking about those wonderful things. Literally, the chemistry in my body would change, and that's how I would feel a different emotion. So we already understand that using fantasy, you can put yourself in a different emotional state. I mean, just think about, you know, Friday afternoon and the fantasies for the weekend. Even if you're not a sex addict, just like you can be emotionally anxious just waiting for that weekend to come because it's Friday at 4. You know, nothing's different in the day except you've started to think about leaving. So in those ways, we can profoundly influence our emotions by our thinking. And what sex addicts and porn addicts and love addicts, what we have learned to do is to use fantasy and especially intensely arousing fantasy, which sex produces, to emotionally escape, to disappear, to have something that we are absolutely completely focused on in the moment, but then everything else kind of fades away until we're done. And as you well know, if you're a sex addict or involved with one, that once the sex is over, that's when all those feelings come rushing back. And that's when we usually end up feeling like, what am I doing here? And why did this happen? And that's because that neurochemical state has disappeared after orgasm. And now you're just you, only now you've been acting out for 2 hours and you didn't pick up your kids and someone's going to be angry at you. And not only do you have the problems you walked into that situation with, but you have more than when you started. And guess how addicts relieve difficult feelings? We go back into the addiction. So that is why it's called a cycle, because addiction, whether it's sex addiction, gambling, whatever the addiction is, its purpose is generally to give me a place to go when I'm feeling uncomfortable or really disrupted inside, even if I'm not fully aware of it. And so as you can well imagine, if you are having a lot of negative consequences because of your acting out, you're having marital problems, you're having relationship problems, you're having problems at work, those anxieties and those upsets are going to feed your desire to act out more. And this is why we have escalation in addiction, because what used to be enough to make you feel distracted or good enough or just help you get through a day or a week, now you're doing it twice a week. Now you're doing it 3 days a week. Now you're looking at more intense images than you ever thought that you would look at. The addiction itself drives itself. It is a self-fulfilling experience where the worse you feel about what you're doing and the more problems it creates, the more often you're going to end up doing it because that's your go-to coping mechanism. And our job working together is to help you not only stop, but find healthier and more loving ways to support yourself than going out with strangers or looking at porn.
Thank you for all of this. I think the only thing I'd want to add on all of this is a great first step, and there is hope and there is help. And so for those that are reaching out, watching this video, keep coming back to the website, keep connecting, and we'll keep giving you the best resources we can to find a different path.
Yeah, I have no question in my mind. I mean, I'm a living example, and I can add a whole bunch of people to that list. People I've treated and people that I know who do have deep and enduring wounds and challenges from various areas of our life that have shown up in our sex lives. But we have grown past that, you know, and we have found a way. You know, I just want to say this to you because Tammy brought up hope. And one of my favorite words, not from a religious perspective, but from a perspective of this work, is redemption. I really believe, just like recovery, redemption is one of those words where I can redeem my sense of hope, my sense of love, my sense of belief in myself. I can even redeem the love that others have in me if I'm committed to this process. And really, the last thing I want to say to you is that The biggest issue that I have in working with folks with these issues is their motivation. It's not that the answers here don't work. If you have a problem, we'll fix it. We'll help you solve it. We'll help you find a way through it. And if that produces 3 more problems, we'll look at those 2. And then if it produces 5 more, we'll look at those. And eventually we will get you to a functional level. But if you are not motivated, if you're here because, gosh darn, I'm just going to shut my wife up and show up here, or you can come and I hope your wife, shuts up if that's what you want, but you're not going to heal. Healing requires commitment, engagement, taking it seriously, and really believing that the life you have could be better and that you want to make it better. And you know what? If you just hang out here to keep your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend happy, you can do that too, because my thought is as you go along, you'll probably start learning and growing anyway, despite yourself. So whatever you're here for, I'm glad you're here. We're glad you're here. And I do want you to have hope for the recovery process. Healing happens every single day.